What's up, guys? My name's TJ. You're watching Dead Pedal Garage, and on this show I like to take cars that I get super cheap or junk and fix them up and make them work again, or make them pretty nice. But I usually take a little bit of time to actually get that done, and so I wanted to do a little bit of a Halloween special, I guess, where I actually take a car and get it done quicker, all in one video. And if you watch any of my other videos, you'll know that in this dark brown patch there was a 1990 Nissan hardbody sitting here. That's what I'm going to be working on in this video. I got it from a guy I work with, and he gave it to me for free because he was done with it and was going to send it to the scrapyard otherwise. And it had a problem with the transmission, so he took that out, took it apart, and over time has taken some other parts off of it. So it is in the carport, ready to go, and the first thing to start with would obviously be the transmission. So I'm gonna get to it. So I'm underneath the truck and I want to try and slide the transmission in, but it looks like this thing's a little off, even though I'm assuming it was that way when they took it off. So to make it easier to go in, use the clutch pilot tool to check and see, and it doesn't really want to go in there. Like, I can kind of force it, but it doesn't go in easily. So I'm going to loosen up these bolts, slide the pressure plate back just a little bit so that I can line that clutch back up and make this easier. It's a bit rusty, but that's all right. I'm just gonna let it. All right, so before I throw the transmission in there, I need to put the clutch fork and the throw out bearing back in there, along with the little rubber boots. And it's all used stuff, but I don't really care if it makes noise. We'll change it later. We want to change it back out to four-wheel drive at some point anyway, so this is just a temporary thing to try and get it going. So what I like to do is just get this thing started like that, and then we'll slide it in there and just kind of work it so it's on there. Go back, snap that guy on, and there we go. And we'll throw this in there. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it under there a good bit. Oh. So I had a plan, and whenever trying to do a build like this, you should always have some sort of a plan. And that plan was split up through the day, fairly simple. You know, day one I had the engine, day two the transmission, and then so on until I got it until I got it finished. And then I had an idea that was, even though I'd like to start with the engine, because without the engine running, what good is it? I can't get the engine started without the transmission being in so that the starter would be attached. Well, so I decided to skip the day two, and all I've managed to do is, well, I finally found all the nuts and bolts, because that's the smart place to start. It sucks to get the transmission in there, realize you don't have any nuts and bolts laying around. So I spent an entire day doing that. And this was supposed to start Wednesday morning. It is now Friday afternoon, and all I've managed to do is get the transmission halfway in there. So in order to catch up, I'm going to put down the camera a bit. I'm going to get the transmission completely bolted in, starter, clutch, slave cylinder, and then I'm going to get the torsion bars and all that stuff attached so that I can move on to being up above the vehicle. And when I get to that point, I'll get back with you. Well, I'm finally at a point where I can consider myself caught up. So, by caught up, I mean I'm still days behind the original plan. But I got the transmission and drive shaft in, I got the cross member in, I got the torsion bars and adjustments all done. Well, and that's it. But now I'm gonna finally start on what was day one. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean out the engine bay. There's not an air filter in there. There's also not spark plugs in there. So I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of debris in the cylinders and the intake. So I'm going to fill my compressor up and I'm going to blow air into there, try to blow as much of that crap out and vacuum out what I can. And then we'll move on to the ignition system, and then the random sensors that are missing, the vacuum hoses that are messed up. I don't know what's going on with that. We have a coolant line we need, air filter, and finally throw a battery in there and see if we can get this thing started. Now before we start on the engine, let's go under the truck and I can show you what I did to get all this stuff in there. I did make it two-wheel drive, and it's supposed to be a four-wheel drive truck. It's not as simple as just throwing the two-wheel drive transmission in there and bolting it all up. The cross member is different, the transmission mount is different, the placement of the center support bearing is different. Of course the drive shaft is different, both in length and the piece that connects to the differential. So I had to swap that out, but it's not going to stay two-wheel drive. I do intend to make it four-wheel drive eventually. I have the case, but I don't have all of the internals, and they were bad anyway, so I'm going to have to come up with something to get that going without spending $1,200 on buying a new transmission online. So for now, this is just made just to work, and there's some riggery under there that I'm not very proud of, but it'll work, so I'm okay with it. But let's check it out. I cobbled together a transmission mount, and I pulled a transmission crossover out of a Pathfinder. The offset of it makes it where you can turn it around and get a little more room because the transmission mounts in a slightly different location on the two-wheel drive than four-wheel drive. And the drive shaft is just a little bit shorter than what it needs to be, but I think it'll be fine. And the location for mounting the center support bracket is actually located further back than it is on the two-wheel drive shaft that I got. And I had to swap the rear flange on the drive shaft where it attaches to the differential. The bolt pattern is slightly different two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive. So let's get to work on the engine. Now I was missing the airflow sensor, mass airflow sensor, whichever, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, and the throttle position sensor, and I ordered both of those, but I only got the mass airflow sensor in as of right now. Still waiting on the other one. Luckily, you can start a car without a throttle position sensor. Usually it may affect how it runs, but it won't affect it from actually starting. So honestly, all I care about is just getting it to start. So hopefully these screws that I got are long enough, because of course the screws in this were missing. If you're going to give somebody a free car, make sure you throw away all the nuts and bolts and screws from everything you take off. You know, why make it too easy for them? Now I'm sure this is going to have to come back off to spray starting fluid in here, because why would the fuel system work after sitting up for all this time? That never happens. I'm doing this wrong. Stupid secret. You know what? I don't fucking care about those. Alright, so I got a battery borrowed from my other truck to put in here and see what happens. We've got noises, so should get something. It actually kind of sounds like the fuel pump's making noise. Yeah, I think it's doing something. I don't imagine there's any gas in there, though. I might have to add some. spitting and sputtering. Let's throw some gas in the tank and see what happens. Alright, I added a little bit. I didn't want to add too much in case I have to drop this tank. I don't know if you can drain it. I didn't see a bolt, but I didn't look too close. I'm debating maybe throwing some starting fluid in there just to see if it'll start. It might not actually be getting any gas to it. Maybe it's just some residual from when I sprayed all that stuff cleaning the throttle body out. Yeah, let me look real quick and see what we can do. Hold on. So I think the firing order was probably wrong. The manual I had showed number 1 here, and then, you know, just following the engine that it would be in order. It didn't really go in much detail, so I just kind of took a guess at it, but I went 1, 2, 3, 4, so it was 1, well, it doesn't matter. But the firing order is not that, according to online, so I'm going to try it that way. So we got 1, and then we got 3, and then 4, and then 2, and I think that might fix it, because it was backfiring, and fuel injected engines don't really backfire unless there's something not firing correctly. So let's try this. Alright, so let's give this a shot. It's going to be kind of difficult, one person. Trying to spray it from across here. Alright, so to end Saturday night, got the engine to start the starting fluid, so we know that there is a fuel problem. Got the tank dropped and looked inside there. It was very rusty, and that pump's no good, and I should have expected it and already ordered one, but I didn't. Stupid mistake on my part, so I'm gonna have to pay for that mistake and get one from a part store locally, which is like twice as expensive as ordering it online, but that's fine. So got that on the way, should be here this afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and in the meantime I'm going to try and get this thing to where it will stop and where it will go when it does finally start, which means I got to get the clutch going, so I'll have to change the slave cylinder, and then I have to try and get these rear brakes together, because I just took them apart when I got this because it was all rusted and seized up and the wheels wouldn't move, and so I took the brakes out just to get it to move around. So now I need to put them back in there, and I should replace everything, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to clean it up as best as I can and put them in there and let it go with that for now. So just need to pull these back off. And they're pretty rusty in there. I do need to make sure these wheel cylinders are gonna possibly work, make sure they're not seized. And yeah, they squeeze together, so I'm pretty sure they'll work at least for now. They'll probably leak, but that's fine. So I'm gonna get to cleaning that up now. I got the brakes all bled, had to get some assistance doing that, but that is complete. It's time to move on to the clutch slave cylinder, or clutch system in general. The slave cylinder on this one is frozen up, so I'm going to use the old one that I took off of my 720 some time ago. Held on to it because it was still kind of working. It just wasn't like fully engaging the clutch, and I would rather that than the seized up one that this has. And I don't want to buy one just yet. They're cheap, but I just want to get this thing going before I start spending money on it. So this will fit in with the doing everything real janky and cheap. I also put in some of these rubber bushings in the rear shocks. They were completely blown out, and so the back of the truck was really bouncy. I don't need this package, so I'll have to return that. But before I do the clutch, I'm going to put some fuel line on, new fuel line back where I took the tank out with some new clamps, and I'm also going to change the fuel filter. I'm still waiting on the pump. I went to O'Reilly's to pick up the one that they had ordered, and it was not right, and it was really expensive. And so since I have to wait for them, I just decided to return it, and I ordered one from Amazon, which was significantly cheaper, and it's all the same Chinese-made garbage, so it'll work. But I'm gonna get this filter put on, get this hose, clutch, and then hopefully by that time we'll be ready to give this thing a test drive as soon as that pump comes in. Now, I probably don't have to change this fuel line just because I am doing everything kind of using the old crap, but I did kind of mangle the ends of it when I was taking it off, and this clamp didn't want to come off, so kind of, you know, was tearing the end of the hose a little bit. And instead of going through the hassle of getting the tank put in here and then having these leak and having to, you know, work in here with the tank in or trying to take the tank back out, I'm just gonna go ahead and change them real quick. But I have some new hose that I had used to pump the tank out when I was cleaning it last night, and I've had this hose for a while. I bought a roll of it online. That's the better way to go than going to the store and buying it. It's like $2 a foot, and I think I bought a 25-foot roll for, I don't know, $15 maybe. It's a lot cheaper, and you have it on hand instead of having to buy a foot at a time or a couple feet at a time. A little trick you probably heard of that I like to use on fuel hoses, and I did it on the one up there for the filter, or yeah, for the filter, just some soap. I got baby shampoo that I wash my dog with, but I'm actually, you know, it doesn't matter what soap, there's no secret soap, but it'll go on there, it'll help the hose slide down, and then it'll dry out and it won't cause the hose to slip off. But I like to put a good bit on there and push the hose in. Makes it so much easier. And since these aren't pre-formed like the hoses that were already on here, I cut them about an inch longer just to give them a bit of room so that they can kind of go into shape without wanting to bind. And I'm just gonna throw the clamps on there and be ready for tomorrow. You don't want to over tighten this style of fuel clamp on rubber hose, because it will actually start to cut into it and pinch it through there. which will cause a leak. So you want to tighten it down just enough to where it kind of starts depressing on the rubber, but not too much. And then that'll hold it on there because it is behind that flare. So now we're just ready for the tank to go in. I'm gonna set those on there so they're there. I think I'll do one that way and one that way. So I'm gonna move on to the clutch and the shifter. And once I get those two things in, I guess I just gotta add coolant just to make sure it has some, and actually clean this thing up because it's disgusting. And there are Black Widow webs all over the place. Luckily I haven't seen any Black Widows, but I'm sure there's somewhere around here because every project car I have seems to be homes for Black Widows. But I'm gonna move on. Alright, so I got the slave cylinder off, and the four-wheel drive one versus the two-wheel drive one, is different. And I was thinking it would work as long as there was space. This one actually has a bit of a rise to it, and so I'm gonna have to use some washers on that two-wheel drive transmission because that one's flat. But I have to use this one because that extra bit of length on the back, the hose won't reach to bolt in, and that's butted up against the oil pan. So it's gonna have to work, but it is seized and all the fluid is in there. So it's probably not gonna work well, but if it'll just work temporarily, then I'm gonna go with it. Again, once this thing is actually working, I will spend the money to actually change some of these things. I just wanted to work spending the least amount of money as possible to begin with, so that I can just change the things that are necessary as time goes. So I'm going to see if I can smack this thing, because it's supposed to push in, obviously. So this one does not. Smack it. See what we can get. It's this thing to hold it in place. Alright. Cool. Well, that's lucky. I mean, it's pretty gross in there. But anyway, I'm gonna throw some washers on here. Throw this thing in there and see if I can get it bled. And change it out later to a new one. And I had no luck getting that slave cylinder to bleed, so I just moved on to changing hoses and other small bits that I had laying around. I was able to bleed the brakes, and I bled the clutch last night, but it just wasn't doing anything. It turned out that slave cylinder, I mean, it was seized, so it makes sense, but that slave cylinder was just squirting fluid out past the seal, and so it would not hold any pressure. But I'm just finishing up with it now, and I did have to put my old 720 master cylinder on there, and that seems to be working. I don't think it's the best. It's probably leaking a little bit too, but that's all right. But I don't have help bleeding today, so I have to kind of make it work on my own. And so what I'm doing is just pumping it with my hand, and then take my broomstick, and I got the seat back reclined enough to where I can basically push this in and wedge it up against the back of the seat, which keeps the pedal pressed down, you know, keeps it wedged in there, and then I can go under and I can bleed the clutch, bleed the clutch damper that's down here back by the fuel filter, and I've just got 1 or 2 more rounds to go, and that'll be completely done. And once I'm done with that, I am still waiting on the fuel pump, and I replaced a few little hoses that are missing. I didn't replace any just because they were bad. I didn't want to go through and have to replace all of them, so I got the coolant line on. Don't know what that's for. I'll just set that aside. And the only other thing I can do until I can get it to start is the little PCV hose that goes on the back of the valve cover to the back of the air box. There was just a little piece of hose. I don't actually have any hose this size, so I'm gonna have to run up and get a foot of it so that I can do that. And also discovered that looks like my VTEC solenoid is gone. Just kidding. That's a joke. I don't know what that is, but that's interesting. And so yeah, I'm gonna, after that, I'm just gonna clean up the inside. And from there, I'm just waiting to get the fuel pump going so I can actually drive it. Tuesday, which is supposed to be day 7 of this build, but it's actually the 5th day that I'm working on it. And let's see where I've actually got. So day 1, I did clean that out, got the distributor cap, rotor, wires, got the mass airflow, but TPS still waiting on. Vacuum hoses, got those hoses, air filter, got a battery. Pretty good on there, just one part. Let's see. Well, can't bleed the coolant yet, actually. Got to get the engine started for that. Bled the clutch, got the brakes, got the parts, cleaned it out. So we're on to supposed to be day 3 of cleaning it up, and that involves de-modifying it, de-personalizing it. I don't know if I'd call it a modification. So I'm going to take the front winch bumper thing off. It's kind of in the way. It's a little bit ugly in my opinion. I got to get these stickers off the side, these stupid door lock skulls. Basically the early 2000s it, and just start over fresh. And I'm going to start by taking these stairs off. I cut myself up a lot with these things. I got these freaking bolts hanging down. Every time I was crawling under the car, I was cutting myself up on them. And they're held in pretty shitty. It's a lot of faith to put on this. Let me show you what they're held in with. That's it. That's a lot of faith to put in these little things. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna get all these stickers scraped off. I'm gonna peel this crap off. This is just some stick-on door bumper crap. And that'll mostly be it. And once we get the fuel pump in and get that going, we'll bleed the coolant and get all the air out of that, and then get this thing running, and then get it cleaned up and make it look a little bit better. Normal, boring door locks, as it should be. And now I just got to repeat that for the other side. I've got work tomorrow, but I just got the tank in, got the pump hooked up. I just really want to hear this thing run on its own tonight. Alright, we definitely have fuel pump. Let it prime a few times. And let's see what we get. Now there's still no throttle position sensor in there, so I'm sure that's why it's revving so high and acting weird. But I guess we'll see when that comes in. I'm hoping that'll be tomorrow. But that feels like a victory. And it has been a week since I cleaned it. Those shots of before cleaning it were supposed to be followed by a time lapse of actually spraying this thing with the pressure washer. Well, I didn't press the button on the time lapse camera, so here it is, all cleaned up. And on top of that, I did find a few problems with how it was running. It had a really high idle. It was loud when you press the gas. It would stay at a steadier high idle, kind of like a vacuum leak, but it didn't do the up and down kind of loping that a lot of vacuum leaks do until you press the gas, and then it did it, which it is still doing that. But the EGR pipe that goes from the exhaust to the valve was broken. So instead of trying to repair that, I just took this off, made a delete plate for the intake side, and made a sort of rigged up delete thing for the exhaust side. So now that is much quieter. And because I was having a bit of trouble tracking down the vacuum leak, I replaced every vacuum hose except for the two bigger ones because I didn't have that size hose and I haven't picked it up. I sprayed these, they're not leaking, so I'm just going to leave them for now. But the last piece of the vacuum leak puzzle is a fuel injector O-ring. Now, the front three are fine, the back one is leaking. So I'm hoping that once I put these in, it'll run better. Let me hook up the battery real quick and I'll show you how it's currently running. Oh yes, much nicer, much smoother, a lot more quiet, but watch when I try to give it a little bit of gas. It still kind of falls on its face at first. And then when you have it held steady at a higher, it still lopes a little bit. But it does correct itself. And it's the same way. Lope a little bit. And it corrects itself. And that is a more typical behavior of a vacuum leak, and this rear fuel injection O-ring vacuum leak is, I'm hoping to be what's going to eliminate this. But my artificial deadline was Halloween, which is tomorrow. So I need to get this done so that I can get it tested and actually do something with this so that I can try and get this uploaded and, well, edited and uploaded to you guys. So I'm going to get right into this. Our spider has finally revealed itself. But I just had this off last week and cleaned all these spider webs out. So that guy right there is new, or at least relocated from another part of the vehicle. Alright, so the injectors are out, and as you can see by that one, that's where it was kind of sucking in. You know, that one kind of crusty all over. You know, same with that one. And then this one I actually was wiping on, so that one not so much. But in order to make this leak free, I'm gonna really try and clean these things up, keep any kind of debris off of them. And once they're all wiped down, I'll go ahead and change these out before putting them in the rail. This goes into the rail, this goes into the engine. So you have those top pieces, you have these which are the bottom pieces, you have the O-ring which seals it in the rail, and then you have these filters which actually go into the cap. Now this one came with a screw, and I'm going to assume that that's just a funny little joke for how much they're screwing me on how much these cost, seeing as how they pay pennies for them and then charge me dollars. So I got it finished up last night, and that was the last thing I'm going to do before ending this. So first, let's look at what we spent. So I went through and tallied up what I got. Transmission $60, transmission cross member 16, transmission mount 7, nuts and bolts 13, drive shaft 11, rotor button 6, distributor cap 6, wires 13, mass airflow 14, air filter 13, shock bushings $6, fuel filter and clamps 17, clutch slave cylinder 18, $26 for the tailgate, which I did not include in, but I had to get a new tailgate. The old one was completely full of fire ants. So it was really heavy and obviously full of fire ants. So instead of trying to clean it out, I just picked up a new one. $48 fuel pump, $25 for the throttle position sensor, and $16 for the fuel injection seals. And so in all, $315. It's not too bad. I actually had a little bit more planned, but ran out of time, so I'll have to do another video on that. But for now, let's take this thing for a ride and see how it does. So I would not consider this thing roadworthy yet by any means. So I'm just gonna drive it through my backyard and see how it does, at least in lower gears. Later on, I'll get to a point where I can make this thing road legal. The tires on this thing, I've had those wheels and tires sitting around. This thing didn't come with wheels and tires, so I stuck them on there. They look awesome, but I have no idea how old those tires are. They're probably, I don't know, 15 years old. Got some scrubbing on the front. Maybe I can raise the torsion bars a little bit more and stop that. Well, it's not bucking like it does at idle, so that's good. Of course, can't really get up to any good speed. But hey, this feels pretty good. So I'll take that as a win. Normally at this point in the video, there would be a cool road trip where they go and do something cool, but I'm out of money and out of time to go anywhere. So instead, I had this big piece of tree fall and get stuck, and I need to cut it up, but I gotta pull it down. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, and I'm just gonna drag this tree out of my driveway, get it out of the way, but that's gonna do it for this. So thanks for watching, guys.